All right, kids, are you ready to hear a story?
Yeah.
Welcome to Witch Toast and Other Tales. Witch Toast, Part 2. After that horrible witch turned most of the town's children into frogs, the townspeople were furious and afraid. They could not get rid of the witch themselves, for her magic was too great. And so they hired witch hunters. They put out advertisements, promising a great sum of money to anyone who could rid them of the witch. And the hunters came from far and wide. They came by the dozens, they came by the score. They brought their tools and their tricks and their witch hunting experience. But eventually, all of them, every single one, either fled or disappeared. At the end of 6 months, the witch hunters had all gone, and no more came. The people of the town were terrified. Many moved away, but the parents of the children who'd been turned into frogs were desperate. They kept their frog children in terrariums. They read and spoke and sung to them. They prayed the spell would wear off, and they searched for some solution. But the spell did not wear off. And when all the witch hunters had gone, the parents began to despair. It was then that the town council met in secret to discuss what might be done. They decided they had no choice. The mayor would have to go back to the witch once again. And so he did. When she came to the door, he asked her to turn the children back. She laughed and refused. He tried to bargain, but again she refused. And finally he begged. He got down on his hands and knees before that horrible, foul, evil spawn of Satan and begged her to change the children back. She sneered, then smiled. "Very well," she said. "I will make you another deal. Bring me witch toast at sunrise on Halloween morning 6 months from now, and I will turn the frogs into children." The mayor rushed back to the council and told them of the bargain. They all agreed that they would make the witch sandwich, and that the mayor would deliver it at sunrise on Halloween day. But they also agreed that they could not trust the witch, and did not want to give the parents of the frog children false hope. And so they kept the bargain a secret, including in it only Mr. and Mrs. Undercroft to grow the graveyard barley and bake the witch bread, Mr. and Mrs. Rotke to secure a dead cow's milk and churn it into butter, and old Miss Havers jam to produce bat marmalade. While the adults had been up to all of their business, the children of the town, and most especially those with siblings turned to frogs, met in secret themselves. They saw the despair in their parents' eyes and the hopeless shuffling of their heavy feet. They considered long and hard how they might proceed, and decided that their only hope was to convince the witch to turn the frogs back into children. The only thing they knew she liked was witch toast, so they decided to make a piece for her, to deliver it on Halloween morning, and to ask her nicely and sweetly to undo her spell. But they were worried the adults would stop them. Besides, they didn't want them to get their hopes up. And so the children kept their plans secret from the adults. Sylvia Undercroft volunteered to grow the barley and bake the bread, as her mother and father had taught her. Rhea Rotke would secure a dead cow's milk and churn it into butter, as her mother and father had taught her. And Joe Smith would produce bat marmalade. It was unclear to everyone just exactly where he would get the bats or where he learned to make jam. And a little girl named Amelia, whose brother had been turned into a frog, volunteered to deliver the toast when the time came. One night in secret, Mr. Undercroft snuck out of the house so Sylvia wouldn't know he was gone. He took barley seed to the graveyard and sowed it among the graves of executed prisoners. And later that same night, Sylvia snuck out of the house and took some barley to the pet cemetery and sowed it among the graves of beloved family pets. Rhea Rotke milked the cows each morning beside her father and mother. When one passed, she helped her father bury it. 1 week later, when night fell, Mr. Rotke said he had a few last things to do and sent Rhea inside. Then he went to the place where the dead cow was buried, dug it up, and squeezed out enough rotten milk to make butter. And when he had returned and he and Mrs. Rotke had fallen asleep, Rhea snuck out, dug up the same dead cow, and squeezed out just enough rotten milk to make butter. Somehow, Miss Haversjam procured bats and turned them into marmalade. And somehow, Joe Smith did the same. But when either was asked how, they just smiled and said it was hard but rewarding work. They were both pretty strange. Came to be the night before Halloween, and at the Undercroft and Rotke family homes, there was much pretense of going to bed, but as soon as Mr. and Mrs. Undercroft were certain Sylvia was asleep, they snuck out. And later, when Sylvia was sure they were asleep, she snuck out. And as soon as Mr. and Mrs. Rotke were sure Rhea was asleep, they snuck out. And later, when Rhea was sure her parents were asleep, she snuck out. And so the adults met in one place and the children in another, and they both worked through the night to produce a piece of witch toast. A bit before sunrise, the adults gave theirs to the mayor, and the children gave theirs to Amelia, and each headed for the witch's house. But it just so happened that Amelia got there first. And so, as the mayor approached the witch's house, he was shocked to see Amelia already there, and holding a plate with what looked like a piece of witch toast just like himself. He hesitated a moment and hid behind a tree to think, and was just going to call out to her when the first rays of sun came over the horizon. Before he had time to call out, she raised her hand and knocked on the door. He watched nervously from behind the tree as the witch opened the door. Amelia, her voice trembling, said, "We made you witch toast. Please bring back my brother and all the other children. We miss them so much." Then she held out the plate. The witch's lips curled into a cruel smile, and she took the piece of witch toast. Then she said, "Just between you and me, little girl, you'll never see your brother again." Amelia burst into tears. The witch cackled horribly, then took a big, greedy bite out of the toast. For a moment, she chewed it. Then her eyes opened wide, and she gave out an awful screech. As the skin on her face started melting, she screamed, "You horrible child! You awful brat! I'll get you! I'll get you!" But her words trailed off as she melted until she was nothing more than an ooey, gooey, stinky, smelly, messy puddle of scum that looked and smelled like vomit. The mayor rushed off to tell the townspeople what he'd seen, and Amelia rushed home. She burst through the door and, to her delight, saw her mother and father holding her brother, her real human brother. She rushed forward and joined them in a great big group hug, and they cried and laughed and were joyous. And all throughout the town, similar scenes played out as the children who had been turned into frogs turned back into humans. And from then on, the people of the town celebrated Halloween bigger and better than ever before, because now they had another reason to celebrate: the anniversary of the death of the witch. Now, you might be wondering, why did the witch melt? You see, the children had poisoned her. They didn't mean to, but they made the witch toast all wrong. The adults made it properly, motivated by a deal they'd made with evil, out of fear and under coercion, and that is what made it so delicious to the witch. But the children made their toast out of love for the lost children, for the siblings and friends they missed so dearly, and out of hope for their return. And to a witch, coercion and torment are delicious, while hope and love are poison. You see, sometimes it's not what you make, it's how you make it. The end.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.